the sleep that would not end. The dead lands did not need to kill a traveler quickly. Sometimes it was enough to let hunger, cold, and suspicion finish the work. Setting. 5 days have passed since the destruction of the expedition's vessel, and Renoria Proud, the First's impossible survival upon the cursed shores of Zondor. The company has remained close to the coast, while their High Queen lies trapped in an unnatural sleep. Surrounded by freezing fog, snow, ruined roads, abandoned structures, and the distant threat of the dead. The sea behind them offers no retreat, while ahead lies the fallen dwarven kingdom that Daenor Grimhorn once called home. Their situation is rapidly becoming desperate. Food is almost gone, the company is exhausted, and remaining near the exposed shore makes discovery increasingly likely. Renoria's condition is stranger still. Despite fire, blankets, healing magic, and the light, her body remains as cold as a corpse. She breathes and occasionally coughs, yet for 5 days she has been unable to truly awaken. Key characters. Present Renoria, Proud the First, High Queen of Noricus, mysteriously saved from drowning and trapped for 5 days in an unnatural sleep. Upon awakening, Morin's betrayal begins twisting her grief into dangerous suspicion toward those around her. Janice Firstspear, free folk bard who remains close to Renoria throughout her illness. His humor helps preserve morale during the journey, while after Renoria awakens, he becomes the only person she claims she can still trust. Daenor Grimhorn, dwarf of fallen Zondor and the expedition's guide through his ancestral lands. Fiercely devoted to Renoria, he gives away his last food and nearly exhausts himself dragging her cart through the swamps. Lady Elaris Asheloon, elven mage and lady of Enshunar, who watches over Renoria throughout her 5-day sleep. Her healing cannot explain or break the strange force keeping the queen unconscious. Kael'thar Valethar, Sanctus Knight of Silvermoon and wielder of the Holy Light, who mysteriously appears within Zondor. Though apparently honorable, the circumstances of his arrival make Daenor suspicious of him. Longfoot Larry, pirate survivor of the disastrous sea crossing. Complaining, hungry, and frequently irreverent, he nevertheless remains with the expedition and helps build and later pull Renoria's cart. Dareth Warlin, bastard and exile of Araya, who continues with the expedition and scouts the road ahead. After Renoria awakens, he becomes the person she most strongly suspects will betray her next. Key events and developments. 5 days between life and death. For 5 days, Renoria remains almost completely motionless. Only occasional coughing proves that life still survives within her, yet Lady Elaris can find no explanation for her condition. Renoria is freezing to the touch, despite every attempt to warm her, and neither healing nor the light seems capable of reaching whatever holds her. More disturbing still, Elaris sometimes sees Renoria struggling to open her eyes before inexplicably falling back into sleep. The mystery of her survival also continues to haunt the company. Janice cannot understand how Renoria reached the shore after sinking beneath the sea in heavy armor. None of them saw her swim to safety, and no one knows that the strange sapphire-eyed shark carried her from the depths. To her companions, the queen simply disappeared beneath the storm and somehow returned upon Zondor's shore alive. The Deadlands will not wait. Elaris warns that remaining near the coast is becoming increasingly dangerous. 5 days have already been lost, their provisions are disappearing, and sooner or later, something within Zondor will discover them. Daenor agrees that they must move deeper inland, where the ruins of 3 villages and 2 larger towns may provide better shelter. Leaving Renoria behind is never considered an acceptable choice. Instead, the company decides to carry their sleeping queen with them. With no proper wagon available, Janice proposes building one from the remains of the vessel that brought them to Zondor. The stranger who should not be here. The sudden appearance of Kael'thar Valethar creates another uncertainty. Daenor cannot understand how an armed stranger could simply arrive in lands that have remained abandoned for 19 years, particularly when ships refuse to approach Zondor's shores. Kael identifies himself as a Sanctus Knight of Silvermoon and demonstrates his ability to wield the Holy Light, but Daenor remains cautious. His suspicion comes from bitter experience. During Zondor's fall, hunger drove even honorable people into serving terrible masters simply for bread. Alaris senses nobility in Kale's bearing, but admits that she cannot know what lies within his heart. With their numbers small and the dead surrounding them, however, the expedition cannot afford to refuse another capable sword. A promise to bring the queen home. Away from the others, Alaris reveals a hearthstone connected to the bastion. She and Daenor make a quiet agreement. Should Alaris die, Daenor must use it to return Renoria home. Should Daenor fall, Alaris will do the same. Daenor admits that Alaris is the person within the expedition he trusts most. Dareth carries the burden of being an exile and bastard of Aeria. Janet worked for money. Larry is a pirate concerned largely with his own survival. And Kale has appeared from nowhere. Whatever happens in Zondor, Daenor asks Alaris never to abandon Renoria. The last meet of Zondor. Hunger begins tightening around the expedition. After searching the wreckage and finding almost nothing, Daenor produces the last strip of dried mammoth meat he possesses. Though he himself is starving, he gives it to Alaris and orders her to boil it in water so that Renoria can drink the broth. Alaris manages to feed a little of it to the unconscious queen. It is nowhere near enough to restore her strength, but it may keep her alive. Daenor's choice quietly demonstrates the depth of his loyalty. When forced to choose between feeding himself and sustaining Renoria, the decision requires no thought. A wagon for an empress. Janice, Kale, and Larry salvage planks, wheels, nails, rope, and whatever usable material remains from the wreck. Their crude construction becomes one of the few moments when humor survives the misery of Zondor. Janice jokes about a highborn elven knight performing wagon work. Kale tolerates the bard's endless commentary, and Larry supplies strength alongside complaints. Eventually, they produce a rough but functional cart. It is hardly a carriage worthy of the ruler of Noricus, but it can carry Renoria away from the coast. The plague of hunger returns. When Daenor asks everyone to reveal their provisions, the true danger becomes clear. Almost nothing remains. Kale offers his portion to the others. Janice claims he can survive on very little, while Larry relies upon rum and unsuccessfully attempts to conceal bread. The nearest known dwarven village lies roughly 2 days away. Whether food still exists there is unknown. For Daenor, the growing hunger carries an especially terrible familiarity, reminding him of the same desperation that helped destroy Zondor 19 years before. The Queen upon the cart. Larry enthusiastically volunteers to carry Renoria from the shelter, but Daenor refuses and eventually entrusts the task to Janice. When the bard lifts Renoria, the unnatural cold of her body immediately disturbs him. 5 days after leaving the freezing sea, she still feels almost lifeless. Janice carefully places her upon the wagon and covers her with blankets. Kale offers to remain close and use the holy light to provide whatever warmth he can, while Daenor personally takes hold of the cart. Daenor's march through the swamps. The journey inland becomes an ordeal. Snow hides mud, roads disappear into bogs, and the cart repeatedly sinks into the ruined earth. Daenor, nevertheless, refuses to abandon the handles. With astonishing dwarven endurance, he drags Renoria through swamps and ditches, forcing the wheels free whenever they become trapped. Only after reaching an old paved road does his strength finally fail. Daenor collapses for breath, and Larry is ordered to take his place. Despite his protests, the pirate eventually begins pulling, while Janice and Kale remind him that Renoria cannot warm herself or complain about her suffering, as they can. The abandoned refuge. The exhausted company eventually reaches a small abandoned base along the old road. It provides enough shelter to escape the worst of the wind, and Renoria is carried inside, while Daenor desperately searches the ruins for food. There is almost nothing. The expedition settles into the shelter, starving, exhausted, and surrounded by the ruins of a kingdom that has been dead for 19 years. Then Renoria opens her eyes. Why, Morin? Renoria awakens weak, dizzy, dehydrated, and confused. But the first clear memory to return is not the storm or her drowning. It is Morin. She begins to cry. When Janice enters after hearing her sobbing, Renoria immediately demands to know what happened to her childhood friend. Janice can only tell her that Morin was last seen going overboard and that his fate remains unknown. The answer unleashes everything Renoria has been carrying. She remembers standing beside Morin when an entire kingdom wanted him executed, knowing his past and seeing his scar, yet choosing to believe him anyway. His betrayal therefore strikes deeper than politics or war. It is the betrayal of someone she had trusted when almost everyone else had condemned him. The birth of doubt. Renoria's grief quickly becomes something darker. She declares that everyone eventually betrays when the right moment comes and insists that she can no longer trust anyone. Janice reminds her that Daenor, Elleris, Dareth, Larry, and the others remained beside her for 5 days, protected her while she slept, starved for her, and risked death rather than leave her behind. For a moment, his words reach her. Then Renoria begins doubting them anyway. She becomes convinced that each companion must possess some hidden motive and singles out Dareth Warlin as the person she expects will betray her next. The thoughts come so quickly that Renoria suddenly stops and becomes frightened by her own words. What is wrong with me? Realizing what she has been saying, Renoria breaks down. She rests against Janice and asks what is wrong with her, weeping over Morin and confessing the terrible contradiction inside her. She hates him for what he has done, yet she trusted him and loved him. Morin's betrayal has therefore inflicted a wound far beyond grief. If someone Renoria had trusted since childhood could turn against her, then every other loyalty suddenly appears temporary. Every friendship can hide a motive. Every oath can contain an ending. During this moment, Janice privately thinks about something he has made and something he intends to keep, believing that a certain moment will come soon. Whatever he knows or anticipates remains unspoken. A queen who wants revenge. Still overwhelmed by grief, Renoria declares that if Morin survived the sea, she will find him and personally kill him. Janice refuses to encourage her anger, quietly telling her that she will not. He remains beside her instead, allowing the fury to exhaust itself until the needs of Renoria's weakened body finally overcome everything else. She realizes she is starving. Bread, water, and an accusation. Daenor arrives carrying the only meal he can provide, bread boiled in water. His relief at seeing Renoria awake is immediate, but Renoria instinctively reaches for weapons that are no longer beside her before turning her suspicion toward the food. When Daenor explains that nothing else remains, Renoria asks whether someone is hiding provisions from her. The accusation wounds him deeply. Daenor tells his queen that he would willingly starve himself to death before stealing food meant for her. Only then does Renoria truly look at him and see what the previous 5 days have done. Exhaustion, hunger, mud, wounded hands, and a body pushed nearly beyond endurance while carrying her through Zondor. Ashamed, Renoria apologizes. Daenor bows and tells her that she never needs to beg his pardon. The sleep that would not end while eating. Renoria asks Janice how long she has been unconscious. 5 days. Her answer reveals that something even stranger occurred during that time. Renoria insists she was never truly unconscious. She remembers repeatedly becoming aware of the world and attempting to open her eyes, only for an overwhelming sleep to seize her again. No matter how hard she fought against it, something seemed to force her back beneath consciousness. Neither Renoria nor Janice can explain what held her asleep. The mystery of what happened after she drowned therefore deepens. Something saved her from the sea, and afterwards something else. Or perhaps the same unknown force appears to have prevented her from waking for 5 days. The march must continue. Despite her weakness, Renoria refuses to lose more time. She orders the expedition to continue under cover of night and intends to gather everyone beforehand to learn their remaining supplies, their location, Daenor's knowledge of the roads, and anything Dareth has discovered while scouting. Before resting again, she thanks Janice for remaining beside her. Then she tells him that he is now the only person she trusts. Weapons. Beside the queen. As Janice prepares to leave, Renoria stops him and asks for all of her weapons to be returned and placed beside her while she sleeps. The request reveals how much has changed within her. Daenor nearly destroyed himself, carrying her through the swamps. Elleris watched over her for 5 days. The others surrendered food, warmth, strength, and safety to keep her alive. Yet Renoria can no longer lie among them unarmed without wondering what might happen while her eyes are closed. She knows some of these suspicions are unreasonable. She remembers Daenor's wounded expression and feels ashamed of accusing him. Yet even shame cannot prevent another thought from appearing. What if he had been hiding food? Themes and mood. Betrayal and the destruction of trust. Morin's betrayal becomes the emotional center of the chapter. Renoria does not merely lose faith in Morin, she begins questioning the very idea that loyalty can endure. Doubt, suspicion begins appearing before Renoria consciously chooses it. Dareth becomes her first major target. Daenor is accused despite sacrificing everything for her, and even Janice briefly receives a doubtful glance when she first awakens. Sacrifice and loyalty, the tragedy of Renoria's growing distrust, is contrasted against overwhelming evidence of devotion. Daenor gives away his last meat and drags her through the swamps. Alaris prepares a means of returning her safely to the Bastion, and the entire company refuses to abandon her. Hunger and survival, Zondor begins attacking the expedition without requiring an army. Starvation, cold, exhaustion, and ruined roads steadily weaken them as the old plague of hunger casts its shadow over Daenor's ancestral homeland. The mystery of Renoria's survival. No member of the company knows how Renoria escaped the sea, and her revelation that something prevented her from waking for 5 days adds another unexplained layer to what happened after her drowning. A queen awakening changed. Renoria physically returns from the edge of death, but emotionally, she awakens carrying something she did not possess when she entered the sea, an instinctive suspicion of those closest to her. The expedition has finally begun moving deeper into Zondor, but the greatest change is not found in the dead kingdom surrounding them. It is found within its queen. She had entered the sea, trusting those who followed her. 5 days later, she asked for a sword before she dared close her eyes among them.